Everybody's Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. And you know what? Everybody's got a price for me. If you want to get your money's worth, then you need to stay right here, because you're watching After Hours with TC Restani.
Alrighty, welcome to the After Hours with TC Restani, the podcast. I am here in the luxury podcast penthouse. I am joined by my esteemed panel of experts. I'm going to go on the horn right now to introduce him. First and foremost, the greatest celebrity stalker of all time, the one and the only South Boston Jeff.
Hey, what's going on, pal? It's great to be here, you know.
It is great to be here. The infamous, well, he thinks he's infamous, the man who has seen more bars
I go to the bars all the time.
Than Sam Malone.
Why did you just say more bars than South Boston Jeff?
Okay, you know, I'll rephrase that. The man who's seen more bars than South Boston Jeff, Vinny Cabelli. Always a pleasure to be here. And making his triumphant return to the program in about a 4.5-year absence on the show, my longtime close personal friend, Strangler Steve himself. What's going on, Strangler?
Man, it's good to see you, TC. It's the first time I've had a chance to see you since the great big operation there. You're looking great.
TC,
you're down a lot of pounds there, my friend.
That's right. The TC almost stood for the coronary.
Well, you're looking great, dude. It's good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
It's good to be seen here. And conspicuous by his absence once again, if you listen to our last fantastic podcast, my longtime co-host of the program, the living legend himself, Colonel Bull Montana, is absent again. Now, Steve, I know you've been traveling the world doing a lot of different things, and you haven't had an opportunity to hear the story of why Colonel Bull Montana is AWOL right now.
There's a story?
There's always a story around Colonel
God.
Bull Montana. And for our fans out there, especially our good friends over at the Couch Party, that have Bull has a long-lost son named the Bulldog who looks just like him. There has to be a DNA test. He's got to be on Maury Povich somewhere down the line. They want to know an update on Colonel Bull Montana, and we're going to give it to you right now. I have not seen or heard from him since Thanksgiving weekend of 2017.
My God.
As we are recording this, it is Easter Eve 2018, and he has yet to give me a call, show up, or nothing. He has no idea that I went under the knife. Nothing. And I called his house, and his family members are like, we know he's shacked up with some broad.
Oh, boy.
And there have been Bigfoot sightings of him around the wonderful city of Revere, Massachusetts. So he is now back once again living with the infamous cat lady Barbie.
That does not sound good.
And now, the only way I can describe Barbie is her hair looks like a bale of hay exploded. And she pulled it into a witch's broom. All right?
Really?
And her whole house smelled like cats, but I didn't see any cats anywhere in the house.
Oh, brother.
Okay?
So I can see why Bull would be attracted to such a fine young lady.
And she's not old. She's like 75 years old.
Yeah, she's older than him.
Yeah, Bull's 62
kidding.
and she's 75. You know what? I don't care. I'm attracted to older women.
Right.
Yeah, but not ones that smell like cat urine.
Well, this is true. And Bull, if you're listening out there, you know my number and give me a call. I, in fact, went over to this woman's house and knocked on the door a couple times.
You're kidding me.
No answer whatsoever.
Oh, yeah, I was with him on the last bull hunt.
Unbelievable.
It was like searching for Bigfoot.
Let me ask you this. How much extra money do you now have in your pocket since you're not paying for an extra 2 or 3 dinners a week now?
Well, we flew you up, didn't we?
Well, yeah, that was nice. The accommodations were great when Jolly Fats Weehawken to London.
The what?
The Jolly Fats Weehawken to London.
I have no idea who that is. Who is that?
Jerry Lewis.
Oh, well. Lady. Hey, lady. Well, see, Jerry Lewis is dead.
What?
He did. He died.
When did that happen?
I think he's living with the same cat lady as Bull.
You're killing me.
No, I almost did.
Maybe that's what the smell is.
It could be Jerry Lewis decaying. Unbelievable.
Sitting on the bed like Norman Bates' mom, you know. Yeah, they keep Jerry Lewis there for inspiration.
So if any of you find people listening in the eastern Massachusetts area out there, have you seen Colonel Bull Montana? drop me a line on my Twitter, and that's at After Hours TC. Colonel Bull Montana, we miss you. We need you back here on the program. And you still owe me the $60 from 1999 anyway. I haven't forgotten about that.
With interest, that's about $5,000.
Exactly. Now, Strangler Steve.
Yeah.
The name Strangler does not become you're not a big fan of the Boston Strangler, correct?
That is correct.
You are a former, well, actually, I wouldn't say former. You are a retired professional wrestler.
That is correct.
And you are not one of these people who got a pair of wrestling boots for Christmas and proclaimed himself a wrestler. You are actually a graduate of the Killer Kowalski Institute of Professional Wrestling when Killer Kowalski was actually still training.
Also very correct.
And we have seen you on television shows for the World Wrestling Federation.
Mm-hmm, that is true.
Not the WWE. This is going back a few years.
Right, when the F was still there and people still cared.
And the F didn't get out.
No.
Now, can you give us some of your history matches that you had in the world of professional wrestling with household names?
Well, first of all, just to go back to the Strangler part of my name, well, there was a old wrestler back in the 1930s and 40s whose name was Ed Strangler Lewis. And he went on to train perhaps one of the greatest champions in the history of wrestling, Lou Thez.
Of course, the former 7-time NWA champion.
That's correct. And up to the late 40s and early 50s, he was the champion. And he went on to train a young man named Killer Kowalski. Killer Kowalski went and trained me. So in homage to my lineage, I donned the name Strangler Steve King when I had started training in 1992, but when I had moved west back in 2000, I started wrestling, and I had used different names in the Boston area, and I was just known by the end run as Phoenix King when I was tag teaming with a man named Damon Darkangelo with the Archangels. And when I moved back out west, it was my return to singles wrestling, and I wanted to do something completely different. And since I did have a tie to my Boston wrestling roots and with Killer Kowalski and his lineage, I decided to take the name Strangler Steve King, and it's stuck ever since.
And it has nothing to do with the author Stephen King.
No, Steve King is my real name.
It is?
Yes, it is.
I never know. I always was Strangler Steve. No, I'm just going. You and I have been friends now for, got to be, 25 years?
Yeah, at least 25
and
years.
And you, like I said, were trained by Killer Kowalski. You were also around the time that the same Hunter Hearst Helmsley was trained at Killer Kowalski's School of Professional Wrestling when he was known as Terror Rising.
That's correct. He was coming down from Nashua, New Hampshire 4 nights a week with a good friend of both of ours and yours, Tony Roy, Flying Tony Roy.
Or is it Tony Roy?
Later known as Tony Roy or Antoine Roy when he took hold of his French lineage.
Oui.
And we used to practice at least 4 nights a week in Killer Kowalski's ring in Malden, Massachusetts at the school that you had frequented from time to time.
Well, of course I did.
And a lot of training sessions together, a lot of miles on the road going from show to show.
Were there a few other people that were there too? Wasn't there a particular person by the name of he likes peanut butter? Would that be Smooth?
That was the chunky operator, I believe.
The chunky operator.
You mean the smooth operating
the smooth
gangster?
operating gangster?
Trey? He's still the ghetto champion from what I heard. He hasn't lost that title yet.
He will remain undefeated.
Also, other luminaries that were training at the time when you were there were, of course, Perry Saturn and
That's
John
correct.
Cronus, the Eliminators.
Very scary guys. I mean, they were living their gimmick where when they came in, guys shuddered because Perry was a really scary guy, as you remember. John Cronus, great guy, very happy-go-lucky guy, but Perry was a horse of another color. When he came in,
well, he was the
everything
Iron Horseman.
Stopped. That is true.
I got along with those two very well. In fact, they used to come down to this very studio and practice promos in front of my cameras back 25 years ago. And I always got along great with Perry. It was sad to see John leave this earth way too soon.
Very soon, yes.
In my opinion, one of the top 20 tag teams of all time.
Oh, they were phenomenal.
I mean, let's just say I don't think there would have been a Dudley Boys if it wasn't for the Eliminators.
I have to agree with you on that because the Eliminators did lay down a lot of groundwork for the tag team division in an early ECW.
It was unbelievable. I mean, they were fantastic.
And in fact, I don't want to blow too much smoke here, TC, but I have to say that I think their very first run in ECW was a lot of thanks to you because I remember you putting together a highlight package for them that was like nothing that was being seen in the business at that time with the editing and the camera work and everything that you had put together for them. I think that's really what helped get their foot in the door at ECW.
I don't want to, I hate being modest and everything like that, but Perry called me up one day many, many years ago and he said, brother, I know how you edit these stuffs. Can you put this stuff together for us? And they brought down all their footage and some custom song that they had, and they sent it off with their matches to, at the time it was Taz, who was one of the, Taz and Tommy Dreamer, who were like talent
Running the
coordinators
office, right, yeah.
and ECW, and they got hired, and they came down and thanked me in person, saying, "Brother, thank you very much for putting that together." And it was a wonderful thing, and it's they did all the work. I just put it together. I just sliced it together.
Yeah, but it's more than just that. And I know you're just being humble, but those kinds of things, those kinds of things like those highlight reels back then, they carried a lot of weight back in the day. It wasn't like there was, people don't realize that there was no YouTube back then. It wasn't just digital online editing. That was analog editing. You were literally splicing tape and putting things together for them. So I really think without that tape, it would have been at least another year or two before they got discovered.
Well, they were always going to get discovered.
Yeah,
I'm not taking.
Oh, they had a look about them that you couldn't
absolutely.
miss.
But I think this really helped expedite the process.
Oh, and if I helped in any way, I'm proud of that, because they were good guys and they deserved a break, and
they paid their dues. That's right,
and they got it. Unbelievable. Now,
John was, I got to say though, real quick, meeting both of them, Perry definitely had that intimidated look at him. He just had that, you looked at him the wrong way. He looked like the type of guy who would snap your neck off.
Yeah.
Cronus, on the other hand, really, just a humbled guy, down to earth. You talk to him, it was like hanging out with like your cousin. Right. You know what I mean? You could talk about anything. It didn't have to be wrestling, and the guy would talk with anything.
And he had a wonderful sense of humor. He was very childlike.
And I have to say, I think and this may be kind of controversial, but I think between he and Perry, I think John was the one that was the more natural athlete out of the two, doing the back handsprings like they were nothing with his background in gymnastics.
And the reason they were great as a tag team, because they didn't look identical or work identical.
Right. They had their own personalities.
And it was like why the Hart Foundation was so good. You had the technicality of Bret Hart and the power and brute strength of the Anvil.
Yeah. Right.
But as together, boom.
Yeah, fluid.
I mean, only a rare occasion do you see people who kind of similar succeed. The Rockers,
right?
The Rock and Roll Express, even though of course Ricky Morton was yards ahead of Robert Gibson.
The British Bulldogs, but I only remember
the
dog.
The British Bulldogs.
Yeah, their dog
very
Gregory
similar.
was the name of the
Matilda.
Matilda.
But they were very similar if you think about the Eliminators.
I agree.
Two different styles, two different looks. Dynamite Kid was the high flyer, and Davey Boy was your powerhouse.
Right.
They wore the same gear, but that's what tag teams would do.
Sure.
But again, and sadly, that kind of went away for a while. Although I'm starting to see that come back now in professional wrestling. You see kind of two different concepts of wrestlers being put together, which is nice.
Oh, like Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas. That was a great combo. That was a great tag team back in the day.
They were the first black WWF tag team champions, actually.
Correct. And that was in 1984 when that took place, I believe.
Was it really?
I believe it was 1984.
Okay. And they beat the
Wild 83,
Samoans.
83 or 84.
They beat the Wild Samoans, if I remember correctly.
I believe you're right.
Now, I have a question for you. I've known you almost as long. Joni was with you too, right?
Yes, Chyna was at Killer Kowalski school as well.
At the same time, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, she started, I want to say, 95 or so, and I had started in 92, and so her first 5 matches on shows were in mixed tags with I was her partner, and she would wrestle my wife, who would be on the other team, and I want to say Snooky Fink.
Snooky.
Snooky was one guy, and if he wasn't on the show, it would be Bert Centeno, would be one of the other guys.
Did he have his belt with
Bert Centeno?
No. He probably had it in his bag, but not on the show.
Now, being back then when you were training with Chyna, or Joni as she was known back then, did you actually see potential that she was going to become a big star?
The minute she walked through the door, you were like, who is this girl? Who sent her here? And it was a matter of not if she's going to make it, but how fast.
And how quickly did her and Triple H bond?
I think it was an immediate thing. Like one of those people. Like as soon as you saw her, her personality was like electric. She was a very magnetic personality. She had a great sense of humor, which I'll never forget. She could tell jokes. She had a warm smile, a big heart,
which you didn't get to see on television because they portrayed her as a cyborg.
At first, she was very one-dimensional female bodybuilder.
She was a
out
Terminator.
Of the norm. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But the person behind the character was a very warm, loving
which you can see in Beyond the Mat.
Oh, I agree. Yes,
yeah, I agree.
And little known fact, she was actually my wife and I were engaged at that time during those mixed tag matches, and my wife had asked Joni to be one of her bridesmaids, and she accepted. And it was only maybe 2 or 3 months before our wedding when she got signed to WWF. So she wasn't able to make it to our wedding because she was then,
She was on the
immediately
road.
put in, on the road in a full-time
With Shawn
position.
Michaels.
Yeah, and doing the precursor to DX.
Right.
So, she wasn't able to make it to the wedding, which was unfortunate. But, I mean, you understand that, she's out living her dream. How could you possibly be mad at that, We ended up seeing her a couple years later when she wrote her book. She put a picture of one of our matches from our mixed tag that had me and my wife in it with her. And we stayed in line. She had no idea we were there. And we brought the book up to her for her to sign. And she just said, "Oh, hello," and started signing it. And then did a triple take, literally. And then said, "Oh, my God," and stood up and started hugging us. "How have you been?" This is out in Vegas. And so it was like completely unexpected, and we took her by surprise, and it was hilarious because everyone's like, "Who the hell are these two people getting hugs and everything from China?"
What did they buy? 2 books?
Exactly, but that was a really nice memory to have, and she was asking us all types of questions about, did you end up getting married? Did the wedding go through? And asking about the wedding and the reception and how's everybody at Walters doing? Please tell them I said hello, and it was really cool. We got to meet Shane McMahon's wife, Marissa Mazzola, that day because Marissa was the one in charge of those bookings and stuff. So that was really nice for her to do that. She didn't have to do that, but it was really good to see her there.
Now, getting back to your career at Killer Kowalski School of Professional Wrestling.
Yeah.
One of probably, at the time, one of the greatest, if not the greatest wrestling schools in the world.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, people from all over the world came to Killer Kowalski School.
That's correct.
This was, now you started in what, around 91, 92?
92. I had gone there in 91 when I was a junior in high school to check out the school because I wanted to start like when I was 16. I actually went there once when I was 16, once when I was 17, but he said that I couldn't sign up until I was 18.
And which wrestler inspired you to become a professional wrestler?
I don't know if it was one wrestler in particular. It was just the genre as a whole was something that I found fascinating and wanted to be a part of. I never thought I would do it as a wrestler. My original goal in wrestling was to be a photographer because I love Steve Taylor's work and Tom Buchanan. They were photographers for the WWF magazine that used to come out monthly, and I had a subscription to it all throughout high school because I every month when it came in the mail, I would just spend an afternoon just going through all the pictures and stuff, and you'd see their name in the credit. And I thought, man, what a fascinating job that must be to be a photographer for pro wrestling. And that was like my precursor to getting to wrestling. And I was like, maybe if I learned how to become a wrestler, I could kind of get into the industry, kind of a weird roundabout way. But that was my ultimate goal, was at that period of time, being 16, 17, I was taking photography in school. I wanted to be a professional photographer and later went to college for that. And I thought this would be the greatest way to kind of become a photographer in WWF.
And back then, to get into professional wrestling was kind of like a mafia.
Oh, yeah. It was very closed door at that time.
It was, when they say protect the business, that's how they protected the business. They wouldn't allow any outsiders in that didn't pay their
very
dues
true.
or know somebody in the industry that would vouch for them.
Oh, yes. It was a very hush-hush industry back then. And for better or for worse, it's not like that today. There's some pros to that, and there's also some cons. But, I mean, I think without the progression of where wrestling went, it wouldn't have survived as long as it has.
Now, for those of you who maybe know the inner workings of wrestling, like you did when you went to wrestling school, when you were graduating from professional wrestling school, your graduation gift was to go working for the World Wrestling Federation as an enhancement talent.
Yes, that's correct.
And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, enhancement talent back in the 1980s and early 90s was, here you have Randy Macho Man Savage against John Smith.
Right.
You know Randy Savage is going to win,
right,
but it was John Smith's job to make Randy Savage look like $1 million.
Exactly.
And you had the fortunate opportunity to be in the ring with, drop some names.
Well, let's see. My first night, well, I'll just tell you some names. The story can come later. But King Kong Bundy, Yokozuna, the tag team known as Well Done, the Quebecers, Owen Hart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, Jeff Jarrett, who's going into the Hall of Fame this year, Henry Godwin. Yeah, man, I mean, the list goes on and on.
Now, after my surgery, you gave me a call to see how I was doing, and you asked me how I was feeling, and I said, remember when Yokozuna used to do that bonsai drop off the second turnbuckle?
Yeah.
I go, that's what it feels like for real. Now, I saw a match with you on YouTube, but he did not do the bonsai drop on you.
I was scared to death of that move, and in fact, people outside of the industry have always heard that Yokozuna was a real nice guy outside of the business. I can tell you that is an absolute lie. He was the absolute definition of a bully, and he knew he could do no wrong in the locker room because he was such a draw for the industry. And in my opinion, took a full advantage of that. And he would push guys around and really, for lack of a better term, would throw his weight around, all 600 legitimate pounds of him. And my friend, we were on a tour for WWF. We were doing 3 towns. When they do TV, they would do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And on this particular Tuesday night, my friend Tom O'Sullivan, who you knew, who actually used to wrestle as Wacko McMurphy in the NWA New England territory.
Who was managed by Colonel Bull Montana.
Conspicuous by his
because
absence.
he ain't crazy. He's Wacko.
That's correct. And he ended up wrestling Yokozuna. And I made the comment to Tom before that match going, oh, man, he really screwed up you-know-who last night. Guess who's getting it tonight? You. He's like, oh, man, because all the enhancement talent hated wrestling Yokozuna because he was always known for hurting the talent on purpose, like going out of his way to do something that was completely unnecessary just because he could without any kind of recourse. And Tom wrestled the match with Yokozuna. I think they did maybe 7 or 8 minutes. And he gave Tom the bonsai drop, which was fine. It was stiff. I mean, you can't fake 600 pounds. You can't fake gravity.
You can't.
You just have to kind of tighten up, take it, hold your breath for a few seconds because you're not breathing, whether you want to or not, with that guy on your chest. Hopefully the 3 count goes quick. He gets up quick, and you can get your money and go home. But for some reason, at the end of this match, he pinned Tom 1, 2, 3, and then stood up, and he leaned back with his right hand and slapped Tom across the ear, rupturing his right eardrum for no reason whatsoever. Everything had gone off to a T in the match the way they wanted it, and for whatever reason, Yoko felt the need to get over one more time on a guy who couldn't literally defend himself because, one, he was selling in the ring to put Yokozuna over to make him look as good as he looked, and 2, because if he had done anything to Yokozuna to defend himself, whether it was in the ring or in the locker room afterwards, you never would have heard from Tom again.
Yeah, it would have been suicide.
Yeah,
career suicide.
Literally. So he took it, and he had a boxed ear, a popped eardrum that hurt him for weeks afterwards for no reason. So the next night, it was the Wednesday night. It was the last night of the tour, and I believe we were in Portland, Maine. And they put the list up. Like when you would get to the show, you'd get there to the building around 12:30 in the afternoon, and you would sign your contracts for the night because every night they'd have you sign a new contract and a waiver and all these things. And then throughout the day, the agents would pair you up with who are you going to wrestle. And by 5 o'clock or 5:30, they would post the list on the wall. And they finally posted the list. And I'm looking for my name down the list, looking for my name. I don't see it. And then Tom O'Sullivan is standing next to me, and he goes, oh, look who you're wrestling tonight. And my heart sank into my stomach, and I went, oh, shit.
Banzai.
Banzai indeed. Steve King, Yokozuna versus Steve King. And who starts walking towards me that I see about like 20, 25 feet away? Boom. Boom. You could literally, like in Jurassic Park when the water is shaking in the cup,
Right.
you could feel him walking towards you. And then he put his arm up on the wall right next to my head to lean forward to read the list over my shoulder. And he says, who's Steve King? Anybody know who Steve King is? Now I'm standing right there, right in front of him. His belly is pushed up against my back as he's reading the sign. And I didn't say a word. I said, I don't know. And I walked away, and I hid.
Hey, you were in Maine. You should have. You should have went and got the real Stephen King and threw him in the ring.
I would have.
It was a horror story wrestling
Yeah.
Yokozuna.
Yeah. Oh my! It was. No, no kidding. It was literally the scariest day of my life because I knew what he had been doing to guys. He had wrestled Tony Roy maybe a year before that and sat full out on Tony Roy's chest and hurt him. You know, you're not. The whole idea is to make it look good. You don't need to hurt somebody to make something look good if you're a trained professional. So after all these nightmares and seeing guys, I mean, he ruptured one guy's lungs where he was spitting up blood afterwards. And his lung collapsed because of that sit-out that he did, the banzai drop. He hurt Scott Taylor. He stacked Scott Taylor on top of another enhancement guy and gave him like a double squash. So they both got hurt.
Double Whopper with cheese.
Extra cheese, extra mayo. And so I'm thinking to myself, oh, my God, I'm dead. I'm dead. And I literally said to myself during that, I quit. I drove there with my buddy Tony Roy because he was doing enhancement work there too. and I was going to ask him for the keys to his Monte Carlo SS that we drove there in, and I was going to hide in the back seat and quit the business, never come back. I'm done. I'm not going to get hurt. This is way too scary for me. And I was like 19 years old. I'd barely been wrestling a year at that point. And I made up my mind. I quit. Fuck them. They can find somebody else. Excuse me.
Anybody else could be Steve King that night.
Yeah, I don't care who it is. He doesn't know it's me.
Right.
And I literally for an hour I had quit the business. I'm done. I'm not getting dressed.
Did you get your payday already?
No. They pay you later, and get squashed now, get paid later.
Right. And if you die, we get to keep it.
Right. Exactly. So it's a win-win for them. So I had quit the business in my head. I'm like, no, this is foolish. This is not worth this. It's not worth being scared all day. It's not worth being away from home. I'm done. And then after about an hour of that, I said, well, am I going to run away from everything in my life? If this happens every time something happens, like if I keep running away, I'll never grow as a person. And if I can get past this, I can literally do anything for like the rest of my life. And throughout the day, Tony Gurria, who was my agent at that time, Tony was a former WWF superstar for years. He was like a 5-time world tag team champion. He had wrestled all over the world.
Him and Rick Martel were
That's
tag
right.
team champions.
That's right. He had like 5 different partners. I think Dino Bravo actually might have been one of them. I don't know. And he kept asking me like every 30 minutes, 45 minutes, hey, Steve, have you talked to Yoko yet? And I'm like, no, not yet, Tony, not yet. Okay. Hey, Steve, have you talked to Yoko yet? Have you gone over your match? No, not yet, no. Then he came up to me again. It was, 6:30 or so. He's like, did you talk to Yoko yet? And I said, no, not yet. He's like, come with me. And he put his arm over my shoulder and he walked me over to Yoko, who was sitting with his dad, Alpha from the Wild Samoans. And he says, this is Steve King. He'll be working with you tonight. He's one of Walter's boys. And they both stood up when they said he's one of Walter's boys because
I was going to say that there's a respect in the business when you're
deep respect
when you're one of Walter's boys. In fact, not to cut you short here, remember the Pink Assassin, our good friend Bobby?
Love him.
He was an enhancement guy, and his name was Bob Van Winkle, and he was going against Macho Man Randy Savage. And when Randy found out that he was one of Walter's guys, he took extra special care with him because he goes, when I was a kid, Walter used to go to Japan and bring back camera equipment for Lanny and me.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
So he goes, he knew me when I was a macho baby. So when he found out that he was one of Walter's guys, he gave him a little.
Right,
and,
right.
And in the wrestling business, he gave him a hope spot.
Right.
It looks like, this job guy.
He's not just the schmuck. He can actually
he
go.
can fight back. And
Right.
same thing when John Studd worked with him. They, obviously because Studd and Kowalski were thick as thieves, he let him do something like that. But what happened with you and Yoko when he found out you were Walter's guy?
When they said, he's one of Walter's boys, they both stood up and they shook my hand. Oh, and Alpha's eyes got all wide. How's Walter? How's he doing? And he's great. Please tell him I said hello. Oh, yeah, definitely. Okay. He's like, okay, well, we're going to give you something in the match tonight. And I'm like, oh, God. I'm like, listen, I'll literally get in the ring, touch me, I'll fall down, pin me. I don't care. I'll do whatever you need me to do. No. So Yoko proceeds to go over this whole match where I'm going to get like 80% of the match. And the finish is he's going to whip me from one buckle to the other. Before I hit that buckle, I'm going to jump up, grab the top rope with my hands, jump up to the middle turnbuckle, do what's called a flying high cross body, back out to Yokozuna.
A la Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
Exactly. And I'm going to give him, Yokozuna, a high cross body. He's going to take a big bump, and I'm going to pin him. 1, 2, at the very last second, Yoko's going to kick out, get the heat on me, and take it home from there. And he didn't know what he wanted to do, whether it be a belly-to-belly suplex or whatever. He said he'd figure it out in the ring and let me know. And I said, okay. So we went over the match like 5 or 6 times verbally. He's like, you sure you got everything? You sure you got everything? So yeah. And I'm thinking, oh, my God, I'm going to be a star. I'm going to do this match. All the boys at Kowalski's are going to, like, crap their pants when they see this because Yoko doesn't take bumps for anybody ever. He, like, not even the name talent. He takes one bump a night with The Undertaker. That's it. They go home. And so I'm going over the whole match. And right before my match, we're in gorilla position, which is the curtain area right before the entrance ramp. And Bret Hart is standing there with the championship belt over his shoulder. And he has to do a promo about Yokozuna before our match. No, not about Yokozuna, but whoever he was, I think Owen Hart before his match. before our match. I'm sorry. And so Brett goes out there and he's doing his promo and he's like, Steve, come here, Yoko says. And he brings me over. He's like, tell me the match. So I tell him the whole match. Boom, 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 boom. Yada, yada, yada. High cross body. 1, 2. Oh, kick out. Get the heat on me. Take it home. Okay, good. By the way, he says to me, I'm really hungry. Well, go grab me 2 hot dogs. And we're literally supposed to be out in the ring in like 3 minutes. I'm like, I have no money on me. And I'm like, okay. So I leave the gorilla position. I'm like literally running full sprint in a WWF locker room looking for my wallet because I have to get money to buy hot dogs for a guy who's going to kick my ass in literally 3 minutes from now. So I find my wallet. I'm like, Tony, where's my wallet? Tony's like, what the hell? Here. Yeah. And I run up to the concession stand. Now this concession stand is like 8 people deep. I'm like, this isn't going to work. How do I tell Yokozuna that I can't? We don't have enough time for this. He's going to be pissed. He's going to fucking kill me. I'm sure you're going to have to bleep that up. So I'm like, oh my God, this was going to be such a great night. I was going to live to see tomorrow, and now this. And so I have to go back to the gorilla position and say, I'm so sorry, brother. I'm so sorry. The line is so long. I stood in the line, and there was 8 people in front of me. Brother, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'll see you out there.
Uh-oh.
So Brett comes back, just finishing up his promo as I'm saying that. And the agent at the table at the gorilla position goes, okay, go. And you go to the ring with the referee. Mm-hmm. So I'm standing in the ring, and it seems like it's taken forever because they're just waiting, setting the tape or whatever they're doing. And I'm standing in the ring. And then they had a guest ring announcer, Josh Adler.
Some kid?
Yeah, some who won a raffle to be a guest ring announcer. So the kid does the match, and all of a sudden, Yoko's music hits. And that actually gives me like
goosebumps, right?
Yeah, hearing. Every time I hear his music, I get a lump in my throat.
And you know what he's looking at when he's walking the ring? You're a hot dog.
Exactly.
Yeah, with mustard, the works, everything.
And ketchup.
Yep. So I'm in the ring, and I can hear his music, and I'm just like, oh my God, it's so loud. The music is so loud. And people don't realize.
Was he with or without Mr. Fuji?
With. And the people don't realize when you're in the ring how hot it is because all the lights are on you.
Right.
So if it's like 85 degrees in the crowd, it's like 125 in the ring.
Plus your adrenaline's flowing.
Exactly. Your heart is just boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, the
boom,
body
boom.
heat of all those people together raises the temperature of the room.
It's crazy. And not to mention, like you said, I'm nervous as can be. I'm going over this match. I know he's pissed because of the hot dogs. And the way the match is supposed to start is that Yoko takes off his robe, and then he does his little salt ceremony. And then he's going to get into the Yokozuna pose, like the sumo wrestler thing.
Right.
And then he's going to move his head around. And that was my cue to charge at him, and he's going to lift me up and push me away. So we go and do that, and that's the first spot. I'm like, okay, that went all right. And then he told me, just stay there and sell. I'll get there when I get there, So, okay, I'm waiting for him. It's like, oh, my God, it's been like 3 minutes. Like, walk over and do something. So he's supposed to go into the first series of spots in this big match. So he picks me up and body slams me outside of the ring. We didn't talk about that at all. That was it. Like, he just literally picked me up like I weighed 60 pounds, threw me over the top rope, and they showed it in slow motion. You can see my ankle bend as I'm landing on the ground. Like, holy crap, what just happened? The whole match we talked about is completely out the window. He's pissed at me because I didn't give him those hot dogs. So I'm like, do I just lay out here? Do I take a 10 count? Will I get in trouble? Like, what do I do? So I'm like, I'm just a kid. What do you want from me? I'm 19. God, for God's sakes, be kind. I'm going to get back in the ring. So I start to get back in the ring, and he pulls me in. I'm like, okay, well, that's a good sign. And he chops me, and he goes about the match. And then he just gives me a couple quick, easy bumps, and then he sets me up for a belly-to-belly. He squeezes me right into his body, and he completely eclipses me. And he picks me up like I'm nothing, hits me with the belly-to-belly, which looked devastating on TV, but actually wasn't that bad, believe it or not. It knocked the wind out of me, but if that's all that happens, fine. And now I'm waiting for him to pull me into the corner to do the banzai drop, and he just covers me right there. 1, 2, 3, no banzai drop. And I went, oh my God, I think I survived the match. This is fantastic. He didn't slap my ear. He didn't puncture my lungs.
He was hungry.
I think I might have survived this match. And then he proceeds to roll over to stand up, and he put his hand on top of my head, like you palming a basketball. and he put all his weight on my head to stand up, and my ears went bing, like it popped my ear. You know, like when you're flying and you get to a certain altitude and your ears pop, it did that because my head felt like it was gonna like explode like a coconut cream pie in somebody's face, you know. And so he just stood up and squeezed my head, like stand up and like left, and I'm like, okay, I think I got through it. And then they hit the Undertaker's gong because they were setting up a feud between Undertaker and Yokozuna.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And they had the red spotlight on me for the Japanese flag since it was in the center of the ring. It was on me because that's where I was laid out flat. And I went back to the locker room. I'm like, was everything okay? Because he changed the whole match. This isn't what we talked about. I never got my high cross body in.
Right.
I never got my close pinfall in. And I'm like, is everything okay? Oh, yeah, brother. Thank you so much. He goes, I'm so sorry about the match. I told the office the match when she went to the ring, and they had me change the whole thing. And they didn't want me taking a bump, so I had to change everything, which is bullshit. He just didn't want to do it. He was just working a young kid, you know. But, like, I thought if that was the worst that happened, I kind of got through it. And like, literally every taping I did after that, for the like next however many years, if Yoko was there, he'd be like, Steve King, how are you? I'm like,
did he rib you about the hot dogs?
No, didn't rib me about the hot dogs, but I was like, I'm kind of over with Yokozuna. That's kind of cool.
Well, there you go.
So yeah, it was.
And you want those Samoans on your side.
Oh my God, do you ever? If there's ever any team of people you want on your side, it's the Samoans, because they are connected, and they were great guys. They were so respectful, and you know, I was just glad that was like if the least thing happened, it was like my ears popping. Then like no big deal, and the biggest part is that I didn't run away and I didn't quit. I got through it, and it made me a stronger person for the rest of my life because, like, literally since that day, nothing was as scary to me as that seeing my name on the board with Yokozuna's name next to it.
And your advice to all those, you should have went back to school and said, if you're ever against Yoko, tell them you want a Walters boys.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that leads into something, right? So we talked about the journey into the business and how it was. My journey, TC knows, was a little different. Right. I happen to be one of the few people that had somebody vouch for me, and that person brought me in, and that'd be Tony.
Right.
But I'll say this. A lot of the kids, I've had conversations with people, and we kind of came from the last, what was called good generation at the time of indie workers and indie people in getting in the business. And I'll tell you, though, there are a lot of guys locally that were in the New England area that credit you for bringing them along. Guys like Bo Douglas, guys like Jason Rumble, guys like Damon D'Angelo. A lot of these guys looked up and would always say, you taught them a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Because you would go back to the school, help those kids out, and give them the lessons that you learned, like right there. You learned shit happens in the ring.
Right.
You're green to the business. You're only business a year. So you're out in the ring. You're with, a guy that's a TV star. He's on the show. He's a superstar.
Yeah.
Shit changed in the ring. You kept your composure.
Right.
You walked back. You shook his hand. You said, thank you. Is everything okay? You were able to teach those guys, the next generation of guys that came in, all that stuff.
Yeah,
and a lot of people credit you for that.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. And it was like one of the things that you were like taught in the business is how to pass it forward and
pass on what you have learned.
Exactly. No truer words ever spoken. So like when I was still going to the school after working for a couple of years, like Walter was getting to an advanced age where he wasn't able to get in the ring all the time for, ailing purposes like his knees or his shoulder kind of clicked in and out. So I always felt like, he took the time to show me. So, you have to like put it forward because who am I at the end of the day? I was no Killer Kowalski, not even close. So I always thought it was an honor for him to say to me, get in there and show those guys a couple things. Like, oh, you trust me with that? I'm like, that's like an honor, So when those guys learned from me, it was because I was lucky enough to learn from a gracious teacher like Walter, So that's
you
what
also
comes down
learned
to.
a valuable lesson, too, and that's what we'll call the paydays. I mean, let's be honest. Paydays back in the day, and still to this day, but the indie shows, you were lucky if you got $20.
Well, back
You were lucky if you got 20
Well,
friggin'
When
dollars.
is this?
We're talking, what, mid-90s?
Oh, no, I was making nearly a living wrestling back then. WWF paydays were really good.
Not the WWF,
And-
talking indie-wise.
Okay,
like
well,
the
because I
local-
worked for Killer Kowalski
Right.
for the International Wrestling Federation, and we actually made very good money there.
Because the difference was Killer Kowalski shows were what they were known as sold shows.
Sold shows,
Right.
that's
Which
right.
means they had a budget. Say you went to
Right.
like the Mr. Jones School of
Police Benevolent Society,
right,
the
whatever.
Fireman's Ball,
some
things like that.
nonprofit organization would
Right.
bring you in to do a fundraiser, and they would pay all the wrestlers. Back then I knew a lot of the guys. Back then, all of Kowalski's guys got $100.
Yeah.
And if you were the main event guy, say you brought in like the Honky Tonk
right.
Man or something,
You
they'd
could
get like
make
$300
more.
or $400 or something like that. $500
In a main event, yes.
plus
fine.
hotel and airfare and
right,
stuff
yeah,
like that.
all your stuff was taken care
But
of.
then you had guys who just ran shows on their own dime, and you were lucky if you got paid at all.
Well, the thing with the Kowalski guys is that Walter was running regularly enough, and Richard Byrne was running regularly enough, and doing WWF TV tapings regularly enough, where the Kowalski guys didn't really go offshoot enough to where we needed to get those extra paydays because we were working enough regularly with the three of them. Richard Byrne, Killer Kowalski, and the WWF
And
that we didn't have
you
to
were
go.
probably doing shows, maybe like 6 times a month?
Oh, at least. And,
Really?
there's a thing with Walter where if you were a Kowalski guy and you were wrestling for an outlaw independent, you needed to be making at least $100 because that's what he was paying you. And if he found out you got paid $50 working some other independent, then when you worked for Walter, you would get that same payday.
Right.
And that happened to one of my friends.
You were shooting yourself in the foot.
Right.
If you
So
work for
if you're
these
going to
other
work for them
people.
for $50, you work for me for $50.
I mean,
so you're killing
there's
yourself.
a reason
Right.
they call this industry the business.
Right.
Because you're in it, like Gorilla Monsoon said, if you're in this business for anything the money, you're a fool.
Right. And that's correct.
It's a business. I mean, yes, there is showmanship and there's glamour, and it does go to a lot of people's heads,
Right.
and they forget that this is a business. You're a businessman. You're an independent contractor
Right.
who is out there to make the most money for yourself, your brand.
Each individual wrestler in his own right is his own LLC.
Correct.
That's right.
And you're selling your time and you're selling your performance for a fee.
And you're selling your reputation.
Exactly. And without a reputation, who are you? You're nobody.
You're Jake the Snake Roberts.
Right.
Well-
And it's amazing how he had tarnished his reputation over the years, only later in these last 2 years or so to kind of build it back up. But he took a lot of credibility and really flushed it down the toilet with a lot of bad decisions. But
Which a lot of guys have done.
yeah. That's unfortunate. But that's unfortunately one of
because
the foils of the industry.
If you're watching wrestling today, I mean, the athletes that they have out there, and I'm not putting anything down, they're athletes. They're better athletes today than they were 25 years ago.
Right.
But they're not the showmen
Right.
that they were 25, 30 years ago. I mean, we can rattle off 100 names right now from 30 years ago that would sell out arenas all over the world.
Right.
People today, the only reason they don't sell out the arenas, the brand name WWE sells out the arenas. Like
Right.
WrestleMania is a couple weeks away. They could have South Boston Jeff versus Vinny's daughter.
they're going to fill the place.
That doesn't matter because
Yeah.
the name wrestling,
Right.
it's like the Super Bowl now.
Right.
They don't matter who's in it.
No.
I mean, 25, 30
It's
years
all
ago,
about the spectacle now.
25, 30 years ago, you needed marquee names
That's
to put
right.
asses in the seats.
Right.
You needed Hulk Hogan on these shows.
Oh, remember the Boston Garden shows? That I remember going to the shows, and if Hogan wasn't the main event, the place wasn't sold out.
No.
Right.
But when Hogan was there as main event, it was sold out. Like, I remember the night I was there when Savage beat Tito Santana with the foreign object gimmick.
That was February 8th, 1986.
But again, I remember these nights because when we would go to the Garden, it would be no Hulk Hogan, you could get a seat. Hulk Hogan was in town, you didn't get
No,
a
it
seat.
wasn't. It wasn't
That's right.
all the time, but most of the time it was a sellout when Hogan was there. And what I remember young as a kid, because we all grew up here on the East Coast, so a lot of us went to. There's 3 big venues you could have gone to. It could have been Boston Garden, Madison Square Garden, or the Philadelphia Spectrum. And we all had friends that lived on the East Coast that we've met later on in life that say, "Oh, I saw Hogan at this building
Right.
and that one." What I specifically remember at the Boston Garden when I was a kid, when Hogan was, I wasn't a Hogan fan. I always cheered the heels, always loved the heels. But when Hogan was in that building, the rafters shook. The floor
Literally, right?
shook.
Legitimately.
But people
Because-
don't realize that's not just a saying. That was a literal
Legit.
happening. Yeah.
If you were in the loge of the Boston Garden and the balcony was
felt
above you,
It was like an
everybody was
earthquake.
stomping. When
Yeah.
Hogan was getting his ass kicked by
Oh, my God.
Kamala
Right.
or whoever it
Killer
was.
Khan.
Right.
Killer
that
Khan.
place would
Oh, my
go
God.
berserk.
Right.
And the amount of electricity that was in those buildings. If you can watch any of those old Boston Garden shows on the WWE Network, on YouTube, wherever, that place would go insane. And sometimes you could see the hard cam
Yeah, I
would
was just going
shake.
to say that.
Yes.
It was amazing. Now I'll just throw this at you. Do you remember who your first Hulk Hogan match was live? Who he wrestled live? The first time you ever saw him in person?
I think he was in a tag team match.
Same with me.
This was back in probably somewhere in '85. I'd have to go
85
back
for
and,
me.
and back and look.
Hulk Hogan and George the Animal Steel versus Adrian Adonis and Paul Mr. Wonderful Orndorff.
Really?
Yes.
Was that was Garden?
It could have been the same one.
Was Rowdy Roddy Piper there that night? Because I remember a match.
He would have been around that era. That was
Piper was feuding Morocco back then.
No,
that was,
Piper was
right?
a heel then. This was '85.
That's what I'm saying. Was it? No, not Morocco. Piper was feuding with Snooker then. I meant. That's usually around. That was
I think
around
that
the
was
Jimmy
before.
Snooker days. Yeah,
That was 84.
That was
This is
84.
85.
Late '85 and early '86, Piper fought Bruno Sammartino in a cage at the Boston Garden, and to get heat. I guess the Patriots were in the Super Bowl.
against the Chicago Bears.
And he came out with Chicago Bears posters and taped them to the cage. And the amount of heat that Roddy Piper got in that match with Bruno, first and foremost, it was the Boston Garden. And for those of you who've never been to the Boston Garden, it is right next to what we call the North End, which is Boston's Little Italy.
Yes.
And every Italian would leave the North End to go see their
Bruno,
hero,
yeah.
Bruno Sammartino.
Me included.
And when Bruno came through there and just smashed him into the cage and ripped the posters,
The place came
it
unglued.
went berserk.
Yeah.
I mean that's what they miss today, because I have nephews who are 7 years old and 14 years old. They used to like wrestling when they were real young,
Right.
just because I used to show them the old tapes. And I say, why don't you watch it now? And they go, well, I tried to watch it, but I want to see action. I don't want to see 20 minutes of guys talking in
Right.
the ring.
Too much talking.
I mean, when
nowadays.
we were watching it as kids, you would have them talk for like 2 minutes with Mean Gene Oakland backstage.
Right.
And they were plugging like Hogan, like, brother, I'm coming to the Boston Garden on
Right.
February 8th, and I'm going to be taking on King Kong Bundy. And you were like, this, I have to be there.
I cannot miss this.
I can't miss this.
All my friends at school are going to be talking about this on Monday.
Right.
But see, they also used to do great build-up back in the day,
Sure
too.
they did.
Let's think
Oh,
about
yeah,
it.
like
Think
that.
about WrestleMania 2, the build-up to WrestleMania 2, because Hulk Hogan had the busted ribs, and he was
Right.
going up against King Kong Bundy in the
right.
steel cage, and, you thought Hogan was going to lose because he had broken ribs. And it wasn't a build-up that, like, nowadays, the program, let's
You
be
get a
honest,
30-day
it's
build-up.
you get a
Yeah.
30-day build-up, and that's it.
And
Back
that was-
then, it was a
and-
3, 4, 5 month
Right.
Hogan Andre. We were talking about this
and,
before
and
we were on the show.
WrestleMania 2 was the first single title defense of Hulk Hogan
That's
at a
right.
WrestleMania.
That's right. The
And it
first
was in a
year was a
cage,
tag match.
but it was those big blue waffle cages,
Yeah,
is
big
what it looked
waffle
like.
cage.
You know what? Everyone hates that cage. I loved that cage. I didn't like the chicken wire looking, the cheaper things down going on in the South.
But
I like the
those
big
ones
blue.
look more realistic, as when they were grating
The
their
cheese
faces
grater,
on it.
yeah.
You know,
Well, that's the thing. I mean, when you had friggin' Tully Blanchard versus Dusty Rhodes and him
Magnum
versus
TA.
Magnum TA,
Yeah.
and all you see is flesh getting raked
Right.
across. It did look pretty good.
But the WWF back in the time, it was more geared towards children,
Right.
And they had merchandise they had to sell. That's how they made money. That's how Vince McMahon became a marketing genius. He
Right.
saw his demographic, which was kids, and the NWA down south, which took it more realistically,
Right.
was gearing towards the people who actually thought it was real.
Correct. Right.
But yeah, exactly what you were saying, Vinny, was the build up for matches took months. I mean, look at my favorite match at WrestleMania history is Ricky the Dragon Steamboat versus Macho Man Randy Savage for the Intercontinental title.
WrestleMania 3.
WrestleMania 3, March 29th, 1987.
She got her skirt. She ripped off her skirt. Didn't
Pontiac
she?
Silver.
No, that was at SummerSlam 88.
that was SummerSlam 88.
The angle for that, where he crushed Ricky's larynx, took place 6 months earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
And they built it up for 6 months. Ricky disappeared for a while.
Yep.
And then when he came back, my God.
He couldn't speak English. Yeah.
And the doctor they had, I'm amazed at the man's recuperative abilities, and it's amazing he's back. And when he came back, Savage played the chicken shit heel. He was petrified that Ricky Steamboat was
Right.
back, and you knew that his title was on the line, and you knew that you had to tune into that because it was going to be a barn burner, and was it ever?
Right.
And Randy losing that match did not hurt him. In fact, it elevated
him.
That's what people don't get.
That's right.
There's a way of losing that makes you
Right.
even bigger than you were before you went
And
in.
it doesn't matter if you're a bad guy or a good guy. If you lose the right way, you can come out stronger than as if you won the match.
Using Randy as an example because he's my favorite of all time, Randy lost that match to Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. It propelled him to being the ultimate babyface down the line, right?
Following year.
And then what happened when he lost to the Ultimate Warrior? He was the hugest, biggest heel in the world. He loses to the Warrior, and then all of a sudden, the whole angle with
Immediately
Elizabeth,
turned
he
into a
was
good
the
guy.
biggest babyface
Yeah.
in the company.
That's right.
In a second, like that, you don't see psychological warfare like
No.
that anymore.
No, because they don't know. It's just a much different world where everybody is just so jaded and they've seen everything a million times. And that's one of the problems with pro wrestling is if you produce too much of it, people kind of get a sense of like how to make the chemistry and how it's built. And then if you do things too much of the same way too often, they can kind of smell it coming around the corner, you know?
See, I think personally, no. My goal, my dream in the wrestling business would have been to not even wrestler, manager. I would want to be a booker. I want to write. I want to write the storylines because I look at the crap that's out there today, and like you said, it's done over. Like, and if you look at wrestling, the '80s was about characters. It was these big elaborate characters,
Larger than life.
and then the '90s brought that. Let's bring an edgy. Let's bring that attitude era.
Realistic, right?
Now people want they want to look at a story and have it be legitimately realistic, like expanded. Like they don't want to see a story. Like if I'm a wrestling fan, I don't want to turn on and see John Cena versus so and so for the second time in 2 months, and that's a story.
Right.
I want to see build up, but I want to see some realism, like actual realism to a story.
What the problem is now is, and Steve, you work behind the scenes in wrestling and whatnot, is when we were watching it in the 80s, there were two guys putting the stories together. Vince McMahon and Pat Patterson. They were the guys, and they would sit outside by their pool and write this stuff. And then later on, Bruce Pritchard came along and all these, but it was still close-knit people.
And it was guys who were in the industry for 30, 40 years.
Right, who understood the psychology of wrestling.
And how to build something properly and with emotion.
In the last 20 years, they went out and hired
Hollywood
writers who know nothing about wrestling or know nothing about psychology of wrestling, because when they're writing for a movie that a director can do 800 takes to get it right. And they're like, no, I need to do it this way. This is live performance theater. Let's just get down to brass tacks here. And you're in front
it's performance art.
And you're in front of a live audience, and you only get one shot at getting that right emotional peak. And they don't have it anymore because they have 50 guys in a room giving their ideas. And then even before you get out to the ring, when you've already been told what to do, it changes 10 more times. And by the time you get out there, what you were originally going to do doesn't even make sense anymore.
Right. They used to, wrestlers used to be known as masters of the one take.
Correct.
Because everything you did was live. You didn't go back and tape stuff again because everything was done in front of a live audience. And to protect the business, everything had to be done as if it was true to form. And when you kind of take... Later, they actually would do second takes on things, and it takes the fire out of it because the crowd just saw it. They did that once with Sensational Sherry, where she went out and did a promo. Vince didn't like the way it was, so they had a match. Then she went out and did the same promo again. So people were sitting there going, we just saw this. So it kind of took people out of the moment. But also, when it comes to the Hollywood writers, is the biggest thing that they didn't have was that they didn't understand the history of wrestling. They don't know what had already happened. So when you don't know how these characters may have crossed paths in the past, or what had happened, or like in a particular championship reign, who had what title for how long, and how it came, how it went from one champion to another. If you don't understand that history and it's lost, you can be using that history to promote what's happening down the line.
And the other thing I don't like about today's wrestling is everybody looks the same.
Oh, everyone's wearing black.
And they all do the same maneuvers. It's a cookie cutter sheet. They're basically, this guy, let's give him this name, this name, this name. You go back 30 years ago, King Kong Bundy looked nothing like Jimmy Superfly Snuka.
Right.
Jake the Snake Roberts didn't wrestle the same way Bret the Hitman Hart did. I mean, no one was going to replace Andre the Giant.
Right.
I mean, you had these characters.
They were all originals.
You had variety.
Right. Well, it is an example of that recently. So, two wrestlers, you had Finn Balor and Seth Rollins. Now, both great, phenomenal performers in the ring. They both do a move called the Sling Blade, and they performed it the identical. They did the same move against each other in the same match. We never saw that,
and
you never saw the same finishes.
Those
either.
guys 30 years ago would be enhancement guys.
They would be, but the business
Finn
has
Balor
changed.
would have been considered too small because you literally had to be minimally 205 pounds before you would even be considered to be the smallest guy in the locker room. Because at one point when I had started at Killer Kowalski's school, I was 192 pounds. And Walter said, well, you're going to need to put on some weight if you ever want to do anything. I had to work at getting up to 205 before I could go and work TV.
You could be on 205 Live.
Yeah.
Joke.
And the other thing
that's
was
the maximum weight for the cruiserweights.
Exactly.
Now. Before that was your minimum just to get into the door to the locker room.
And the other thing is now guys don't have ring gear. You look like someone who's sitting in the front row.
Right.
I mean, when you watch wrestling,
there's no pageantry.
Well, yes, when you watch wrestling 30 some odd years ago, they all had costumes,
and tights
and they had
costume and robes.
individualities. Like, well, I based my jacket obviously off of Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Right.
I mean, here was a guy, without all that stuff and his quick wit, he didn't stand out. You always want to make sure you stand out. That's what you're the focus point when you're walking to that ring. You want everybody to notice you.
Right.
That's
Be
the
different
problem
from
with
them.
the writers today. The writers today, the people who are writing wrestling and writing these gimmicks, they have no clue. They're not tuned in. They don't care. I don't think they care about the history of the business. They are only looking at what Hollywood
Well, some of
wants.
these people are only 20-something years old.
You
If
know,
that.
And they have no
And-
idea. They're they could write for Spider-Man movies perfectly.
Right.
I agree 100%. But it's like I look at some of the gimmicks today, and I'll take Finn Balor and his whole club gimmick. Look, the fans aren't stupid. They know that Finn Balor and Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows, that they came from New Japan. They were part of this huge gimmick called the Bullet Club.
Only certain fans know that. The internet fans know that. The,
20%.
But that's what the fans are.
the average
nowadays.
10-year-old kid has no idea who
Not
they
the
are.
10-year-old kid, but they forget that there are the 25 to 45 demographic of fans who are on YouTube watching all these videos. They know what's going on. They're the people going nuts when these people are coming in. And then it's like Steve Austin said it best. I was listening to the Steve Austin podcast, and he said, I hope Vince doesn't destroy this bringing these guys in. There's a lot of stuff you
They
could do
didn't
with them.
stand a chance having that go anywhere because it wasn't Vince's creation, and that's the only way Vince will really truly push something if it's
If it's
he
his own
created- 'cause
creation.
I can understand that, because why would you take something that was big somewhere else and do that in your own thing? Because then it's like, well, they could have done that
Well,
anywhere.
he used to do that. Hulk Hogan was
A
Hulkamania
long
before
time
he
ago.
came there.
Well, yeah, that was before he realized that he could own your persona.
Right.
But I think one of the bigger problems is the fact that they're trying to book things in like a quote unquote like reality. Like, I don't watch wrestling for reality. I have plenty of reality. I deal with reality every day of my life. I look at wrestling for fantasy. I want to see like larger than life characters. I want to see gimmicks. And I like the gear and the music and the lighting treatments.
Sure.
Oh,
That's what I
absolutely.
want. I want the smoke and mirrors. I want the pyro.
It's like if we went to a Star Wars movie and in the middle of the lightsaber battle, Darth Vader took off the mask and goes, "Hi, I'm David Prowse, and I'm
Right,
not
exactly.
really a Sith Lord."
No one wants to see that. But like, so you have a guy like you said, Finn Balor, Vinny, who came from Japan. Big deal. You know what kids want to see? The demon.
Right.
They
Yes,
want
the
to see the
demon sells
demon
more.
because of the face paint, the body paint, the hair,
The gimmick.
the lighting. When he comes to the ring, and then his music hits that certain note, and everybody does the same hand gestures.
Yep.
That's what makes the demon a star, not Finn Balor having a silly grin standing behind the
Yeah,
Miz
that's-
on Monday
yeah.
Night Raw, and they're waiting
and
for a bump.
if these writers follow the comic book routine, no one cares about Bruce Wayne. They love Batman.
Right.
And if this guy's doing this gimmick and he's, and one day he's Finn, next day he's the demon, people are obviously, they know they're the same two person, but they want to see the demon more than they want to see
Right.
Clark Kent and Superman.
They could remove the Finn Balor part of that character completely, use the demon 4 times a year in the ring, and make more money doing that than if Finn Balor wrestled every week as Finn Balor.
The one thing that killed wrestling, in my opinion, was, all right, we all knew it was a show going in.
Right.
I mean, if you didn't,
There was no mistaking that. If you watched it for 5 minutes, you knew
right,
what it was.
and they're punching each other in the faces and no
Right.
one's
But
bleeding.
it doesn't
or
matter
anything.
because you don't care.
Right. It's the same thing. They gave away their tricks. You
Right.
don't see David Copperfield saying, "I didn't really make the Statue
Right.
of
This
Liberty
is how I did it.
disappear."
Let me show you.
They don't want to do that. Once they, I mean, as a fan, like, ooh, that's kind of cool that they're pulling the curtain back a little.
Right.
But when they pull it back the entire way and showed you everything,
And they're constantly reminding you about that too when they say every week, this is the 157th episodic such and such,
Right,
you
well-
know, longest running episodic television show in the history of TV.
and the guys now, this is nothing against the guys.
You don't
All-
have to tell
all the
people
people in the wrestling, and the boys in the business, they're tremendous athletes, and they're only doing what they're told.
Right.
But back 30 years ago, when we were huge fans, the wrestlers never broke their character.
Exactly.
When you saw
That's
them
true.
at the
That's true.
airport or at the Kowloon,
That's right.
they may have been toned down a little, but they were still their character.
Right. King Kong Bundy was always King Kong Bundy.
Andre the Giant was Andre the Giant. Doesn't matter
Right.
where you saw
Right.
him.
I've met well, what's his name? The Senator Jesse Ventura. At least 3 times. The first 2 times I met him was at the Boston Garden. And he walked by me with the autographs, where I collect the autographs because I started as a kid. And Jesse the Body walked by me and said, "No, you little creep, get away from me." And I was like, "Oh."
Yeah, you know what would happen
And then
now if they did
later
that?
on in
You get
life,
sued.
I met him in an arcade, and I brought it up, and he was like, "Hey, kid, I was just playing bad guy wrestler. I hope you realize that."
You know
I
what?
was like,
Right.
You don't want to
And it's
hear
actually
that.
Part
Bobby
of,
Heenan
part
was
of the
priceless like
experience
that.
was him calling you a little creep, because you still remember it to this day. If that
course
happens
I
now,
do.
like Kevin Owens actually healed a young fan when he was first coming
Yeah.
into WWF, and he caught heat for being his
bad guy,
character,
for being
like,
a heel.
and it was during a show. Like, if you're a bad guy, be the bad guy. Don't be afraid to be the bad guy. And he got in trouble for doing that.
What the problem is now? These wrestlers are afraid of heat.
Yeah.
They're afraid of it. Back 30 years ago,
See, like a
they would
Roddy
kill for
Piper
it.
never would have gotten a job now. Could you imagine that?
No, he never would.
Because
No,
he was too real of being like Roddy Piper was Roddy Piper.
Right.
You know, he wasn't turning it on or off. He was just that guy.
We have all at this table had experiences with Jimmy Superfly Snuka, the late great.
Love you.
And he was a shoot.
Oh yeah.
Plain and simple.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what you saw in the ring was what he was behind the scenes. And you know what? I respect people that in the industry more because of that, because they never broke character. That's what made Andy Kaufman so unique.
Right.
He was a huge Freddie Blassie fan.
Right.
And when he found out the inner workings of wrestling, that whole thing with Jerry Lawler, obviously it was staged if you saw the movie Man on the Moon.
Right.
But they never gave up that they were in on it.
And
was a
he was
gimmick.
not
They
afraid
left-
of
they
the
lived the
heat.
gimmick.
He embraced the heat and got more of it.
Right.
He did whatever he could to go out and get more, talking down to people. I'm from New York City and I'm a star, but you're from Memphis, Tennessee,
Right.
and you don't know
Oh yeah,
what
he always
soap
had to be
is.
one step ahead of the crowd and
Right.
everything. Him and
But
like
and a lot of people said that he would get heat in Hollywood for like he wasn't going to have any more fans because he was talking down to people so much as this heel wrestler.
Right.
He didn't care because he wanted to get that character over so
he,
much.
he was 10 years too early.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
if when he wanted to do that stuff with Jerry Lawler, if Vince McMahon Senior Jr. was running things then, he would have been at WrestleMania 1.
Right.
Without question, if he didn't pass away. Because he was that unique and he loved the business and he kayfabed.
Didn't he approach? Didn't Kaufman approach Vince Senior
Yes,
to do it first?
he did,
And
and-
he's like, no, we're not going to have an outsider in here.
This
doing
isn't this isn't Hollywood.
right. And you know what? In a way, you can't blame Vince Senior for doing that because he was protecting the industry.
He's protecting his business.
Right. So you couldn't, down in Memphis, the Memphis area, they had that room where, like, well, it could help us.
It did help. him.
You know, Madison Square Garden was selling out regardless of who was there because Bruno
Right.
was on top, Pedro Morales was on top, Hulk Hogan. They were selling these places out. They didn't need
Jerry
Andy Kaufman.
Lawler would still be in Memphis, Tennessee if Andy Kaufman did not come down there.
Right.
We would not know
He
him as-
never would have. He never would have broken through.
No one would have known the word puppies or anything like
No,
that.
right, that-
Andy Kaufman,
All
and
dudes
I'm
are
sure
Andy
Jerry would be the
Kaufman.
first one to admit that.
I'm sure he would.
I mean, if it wasn't for Vince McMahon Senior saying no, and Andy going down to Memphis, Tennessee, and be going on the David Letterman show, that's what made people realize,
right.
there's wrestling outside of the New York area.
right. There's
Because
more
Jerry
than what we know.
exploded after that. I mean, he exploded in the wrestling business.
I mean,
after
it
that.
was less than 10 years later that he made his way to the WWF.
Well, think about it. After that, I remember as a kid collecting all the magazines, and I would read about his feud with Jeff Jarrett and all these different feuds, and they would show the blood, and it was. I mean, Jerry, after that, Memphis, you heard about these other wrestling organizations. You know, if you were up here, in the early 80s, the only one you ever saw was, if you didn't collect the wrestling magazine and you just turned the TV on, you were lucky if you caught NWA. Mm-hmm. You didn't see AWA, you didn't see WCCW, you didn't see any of that stuff. Then, once this stuff got to happen, and the magazine, and again, that happened, and it really did kind of.
Well, what opened it up for everybody was cable television.
That's
I mean, when I had rabbit ear television, all we got was Channel 56 and the WWF,
38 too,
and
yeah.
38 may have had like an old NWA worldwide show on it, like
Yeah.
8 in the morning on a
WLVI,
Saturday.
TV 38.
But it opened it all up. But what we're going to do right now is we're coming to the end of this first part of our big-time podcast here with Strangler Steve. We're going to tape another episode, which will air next week. But I want to thank everybody on this program here. South Boston Jeff. Yeah, I know you're a huge wrestling fan from the 80s, and in the next episode we're going to get into stuff that you really can sink your teeth into. Vinny Capelli, of course, huge wrestling fan. Strangler Steve, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me
back.
back.
And
It's great to be
It
back.
was unbelievable having you on and giving a little peek behind the curtain of what went on with you and Yokozuna back. What year was that? 1994?
94-ish, I believe. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That's very fascinating. He always seemed like a cool, smart, pot-smoking kind of guy from Hawaii.
That's all Jeff really cares about. You know, Jeff, you would have been loved back in the 1980s
boy,
wrestling
Lee.
locker rooms with all your
Now,
men
wait,
say.
quick question. Yoko was Arthur's brother, right? He
Son.
was
Sons.
Oh, so he was Arthur's son. Okay.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is, for those of you who are listening to the podcast right now, and if it's next week, just click on to the next episode. But this is After Hours, and we what?
We
Never
never
close.
close.